The con law question from July of 2006 is about as straightforward a First Amendment problem as you can hope for. This hypothetical covers the ground completely with regard to the First Amendment. This is a good fact pattern to review if you want to make sure that you've got a good checklist for the First Amendment. Have a look with me at the call of the question. Videorama, Incorporated, a local video store, has brought an action claiming that the ordinance violates the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. What arguments may Videorama, Incorporated reasonably make in support of its claim? And is it likely to succeed? Discuss. Well, as often is the case, the shorter fact patterns prove to be the more difficult. Now, I've just said this is a very straightforward question, and it is. But you've got to do a thorough job and handle all of the details if you want to get an impressive score on this question. So now let's go to the top of the page and let's have a look at this ordinance. We've got at the very beginning an effort to clean up Columbia County. Well, I'm sure we all agree it needs it. So the Board of Supervisors has passed this ordinance, and we get a 4-part ordinance. Now, although these 4 parts do not exactly correspond with con law theories, we are certainly going to be referring to each one of them specifically. 1. A review panel is established to review all sexually graphic material prior to sale. Well, that word prior is in there for a reason. It's a prior restraint, and that's one of the First Amendment arguments that the video store is going to make. 2. Subject to subsection 3, no person or entity in Columbia County may sell sexually graphic material. Well, that seems like a fairly clear-cut violation as well. 3. A person or entity in Columbia County may sell an item that is sexually graphic if A. It first submits this graphic material to the review board, and B. The review panel says it's okay. And here we've got the phrase sole discretion. So they didn't quite spoon-feed it to us and call it unfettered discretion, but that's what it is. And then 4, the penalty. Any person or entity in the county who fails to comply with subsections 2 or 3 is guilty of a misdemeanor, and they're going to get punished. And then we get the call of the question again. Now, let's pause for a moment and glance at this fact pattern. Look at how simple it is. There are multi-state questions on con law that are longer than this, and you've got to be able to answer them in just a couple of minutes. And we've got an hour to handle this question. We really need to sit back and think carefully before we write or type one word of our answer. Now, turn the page and have a look at the outline of issues that I've presented. You'll see that I am doing nothing innovative here. What I am doing is neatly applying our basic con law method to make sure that I set up a framework that will allow me to do what I think is important here, find a home for every single detail, and come up with every single constitutional argument. That requires a little bit of thinking, but it isn't terribly difficult intellectually. This is one of those questions where either you know the material or you don't. And if you don't, you're in trouble. But if you do know it, you still need to have fairly good technique to be able to write the most comprehensive answer possible. So you'll see I start off with standing, ripeness, and mootness. Then I turn to state action. Then we get into the First Amendment issues. I start out by talking about obscenity and profanity and use that to distinguish where the boundaries are, constitutionally, from what this statute is intending to do. Then I get to the First Amendment arguments, which really directly answers the call of the question. I talk about the prior restraint first. It's probably the most serious argument that they've got, and it's also the one that we saw first. Then we talk about the ordinance being void for vagueness. We discuss it as being overbroad, and we focus on the unfettered discretion of the review panel. That's it. That's all of the arguments that are available. So we've got to analyze them clearly and in a question this concise. Presenting the law clearly is important as well. So we go to the constitutional standard of review, which would be strict scrutiny, and the result is this ordinance loses and the video store's constitutional arguments prevail. Well, that is simple enough. Now take a look at the model answer that I present, and let's really focus on these issues a little bit more. This is an answer where good writing and clear technique can be crucial to success. As you look at the very first paragraph that I write, you'll see, as usual, I lead with the facts. I indicate who the parties are, what the action is about, and then I give a little hint that this plaintiff has got some very strong First Amendment arguments. But before we get to those arguments, we have to present the broader context for the litigation. We have to establish standing, ripeness, and mootness. Now, all of it is so obvious that one might be inclined to sort of dash it off in just a few words. But I take a whole page, almost, the better part of page 1, to talk about standing, ripeness, mootness, and state action. And here I present a fair amount of law and a comprehensive explanation of where the facts and the law touch. Clearly, this is a plaintiff that has standing, and this is a dispute that is ready for adjudication. Next, I turn to obscenity and profanity to indicate clearly what the established boundaries of acceptable government regulation of speech in this context, so-called adult entertainment, are. So we look at those, and then finally we're ready to turn to a direct answer to the call of the question, which is the First Amendment arguments offered by this plaintiff. So we turn first to the ordinance being void on its face as a result of it being an unconstitutional prior restraint. This phrase, void on its face, is important in constitutional litigation with regard to speech issues. And the reason for that is because a statute that's void on its face is a statute that a party can ignore and simply refuse to comply with because it is so unreasonable. And you'll notice that I focus quite clearly on both what the law is and what happened. And I indicate that Videorama would have been within its rights to just ignore the law and wait to be prosecuted. But instead they've chosen to litigate, which is well within their reasonable range of choices. Next I turn to the vagueness issue, which is focused on the phrase sexually graphic. It's hard to know what that is, but it looks like something far short of obscenity. So probably this ordinance is going to fail as an unreasonable prior restraint. But another independent reason for it to fall short of constitutional standards is that it is impermissibly vague. Similar to vagueness is the overbreadth argument. The difference is that the overbreadth argument indicates that the ordinance will catch a lot of protected speech in its dragnet, and thus it's another ground for striking down this statute. Finally, we focus on the unfettered discretion of the review panel, and we see, here again, yet another independent reason for striking down this statute. A group of local potentates does not get to exercise veto power over the fundamental right of speech. It's wrong, it's not constitutional, and the video store prevails on this argument too. Finally, the last stem of the analysis is the strict scrutiny standard. You'll see up front I explain exactly what that standard is. Then I apply the stated goal of this statute to clean up the county with that strict scrutiny standard of review. Clearly, this statute falls well short of what strict scrutiny would require, and therefore the video store prevails across the board. And I will make one final comment about this fact pattern and this answer. I think that this is one of those comparatively rare essay questions where there really is a correct answer. I don't think you can uphold this statute and do a decent job in terms of your score. This is an example, like the multi-state, where we are being given a clear question that has a specific, correct answer. This statute is unconstitutional. It violates the First Amendment free speech rights, and thus the plaintiff wins.